joining me on a quilting tale today. My name is Shaylin and I am excited to launch a new series of videos that center around the 1930s reproduction prints. And I will be making a sampler quilt from the book The Farmer's Wife, 1930s Sampler Quilt. And so this book blends a lot of letters to the editor from a magazine called The Farmer's Wife that was very popular in the 1930s during the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and just a time where people had to be resourceful out of necessity. The resourcefulness of that era is intriguing to me, and I also just have a great deal of respect for the people who lived during some challenging times and made do with what they had. And the letters in this book are really just a testament to the optimism and the hope that people had during that time, or at least tried to hold on to. And so it certainly makes me feel more appreciative and grateful for what we have today. I had mentioned my great Aunt Janet maybe a year or so ago when I had made a pillow for her. I showed it in a progress video because her family is from Nebraska, so I made the Nebraska state block into a pillow to give to her for her birthday. And so that was maybe 1 or 2 birthdays ago. She did pass away this last fall, just after her 94th birthday. So she was born in 1929 and was a child during this era, and I really appreciated talking to her about it, what it was like for her as a kid growing up in the Depression. It's funny to hear from her because I think adults would probably view it differently. But she said she remembered moving in with another family during that time, and she didn't understand why, but just had a lot of fun because there were a bunch of kids in the house, and so she didn't have very stressful memories about it. And so it was just interesting to hear, a kid's take on it. The last time I visited her, she told me a story about when she was 5 years old and her family was at a hotel and her parents had stepped out for a bit. And that's when she saw her opportunity to try the telephone, because she had never used a phone before and didn't know what was on the other line, but had just seen her mom standing at the wall talking into it, and she answered it and someone said, "Number please," and she screamed and dropped it. She said she didn't know another voice was going to come out on the other side. And so I just thought that was funny because, we've just grown up in different eras and are used to different things, and so just to kind of hear that new technology coming in, I loved hearing her stories. And so I'm really excited to make a quilt that is a tribute to that era, and the fabrics are just gorgeous, and I want to talk about those. Really, that's the point of this video, is I want to share the fabric selection and a little bit of the history of the feed sack fabrics that inspired these 1930 reproduction prints. And then I'll show you the fabrics that I've pulled and have been collecting to make this quilt. I will be doing foundation paper piecing. That's what this book uses, and so I've done some before, but it's been a while, so I'm going to be dusting off those skills and trying a few blocks, and then when I feel like I've got the hang of it again, I'll do a video to show how I foundation paper piece. But after that, I'm really excited for the videos to follow as I make the blocks. I'm going to do something special with those videos with my husband's help, because he has some better Premiere Pro skills than I have. So please be watching for those if you're interested at all in this era and the fabrics of that time. So just a quick history on this fabric. Feed sack fabrics have been around since about the mid-1800s, and in the late 1800s, manufacturers found a less expensive way to make them using the cotton feed sacks, which is what the reproduction prints are based on. They originally started as feed sacks for animal feed, and then they became used for household goods too, like flour, seeds, sugar, rice, just anything that could be held, for the household. It was less expensive than, barrels and tins and boxes, and so feed sacks became the packaging of choice during that time. They started off white, maybe had some red or blue prints on them, often just the manufacturer's information or logo. But around 1925, they evolved to what you might think of now when you think of feed sacks. And that is when manufacturers started putting prints on the feed sack fabric. Florals, geometric prints, stripes, eventually characters for children, because they realized that women were wanting to repurpose those sacks to make things for the household, whether it was clothing or linens, curtains, aprons, bedding. It could be repurposed, and that really became critical after the stock market crash and the Great Depression. Like I mentioned, it was an era of necessity to be resourceful. And all the way into World War II, you know, women were told it's your patriotic duty to conserve resources. And so, again, it was just a time of not luxury with these fabrics, but really finding other uses for them, not throwing away and being wasteful with them. So those manufacturers became a bit competitive with each other to get women to buy them, not based on what was inside the bags, but the print on the outside, and just making them as appealing as possible for their customers. I read a funny story about how it would take about 3 feed sack bags to make a woman's dress, and so she would need matching bags, and so some of the store clerks would get frustrated because the bags were heavy and they'd have to dig around looking for 3 matching ones to make a dress. So the prints went from just plain with maybe some darker red or blue on them to pastel colors and colors that were popular at the time, and by the late 1930s the feed sack prints were really booming, and they carried on into the 50s and 60s until packaging started changing again. So I have some actual feed sack fabric that I've found at antique stores and some quilt shows where they had feed sack sellers. And then I have a lot of reproduction print that's made to look like that time. And so I'm going to share some of those fabrics with you next. But I also thought I would recommend a book if you just like looking at the prints of that time and want to know more about the history. This was a great book, Feed Sacks by Lindsay Cole McCrae. There's a lot of history in the front of the book, and then the back is just all prints, so you can see some of the different prints from the time. There's a lot of plaid, there's different characters, florals, lots of kind of, I don't know if the word is ditzy, where they're kind of scrambled all over. There's not a lot of directional print. The dainty flowers, smaller characters, just smaller prints, and lots of pastels. So I was kind of, when I'd look for fabric, was thinking of these, keeping these images in mind. Some fabrics will say 1930s reproduction on, but some just had the look. And so I'm going to show you now what I've been collecting. So let's talk about fabrics that I'm going to use in this quilt now that we have an idea of what makes something a feed sack or 1930s replica print. I pulled several fabrics from my stash, but I thought I'd use as a starting place fabric that already says 1930s on it. So I have this 1930s Basics, a Flower House collection by Debbie Beeves, and it's a Robert Kaufman charm pack here. And I brought this into a local fabric shop and just looked at the colors in here. And as I was researching, you know, the prints and colors, a lot of bold red and blue were used, like I mentioned, and so you'll still see those in the reproduction prints, but then most of them are pastels. And so I brought this charm pack in to the fabric shop to get some solids, because a lot of the blocks
I think would be too busy if all they were prints. And so the solids will give a nice resting spot for the eye and still complement these pretty prints. So from this charm pack, I pulled these colors, and these are all Kona solids, and they don't print the name or number on the selvages with these solids. And so on each one, I wrote a little sticker with the name. So if I need more, I just ended up getting a half yard of each to start with. But I have this pink one here is called Wood Rose, and then this brighter purple is called Gumdrop, Violet, Blue Jay, Azure, Cypress, Duckling, I thought that was such a fitting name, Nectarine, and Lipstick. So I used this color palette here to compare the fabrics that I have in my stash. And I have some fabrics that already say 1930s on them, or they're specifically meant to look like 1930s. But what I did was kind of compare and see, do they look nice with these colors? And so I would take some that have those either floral or geometric prints, or the character, the prints for kids, and just compare them and say, does that look nice? Like, you know, if I held it up to the red here, I think, yeah, that's pretty. Or next to my light green here, those look nice. So I just did that with a bunch of my prints, and I wasn't picky if it was, you know, if there were different shades of blue. What I was just looking for was kind of a dainty motif, small print, so nothing really large scale, that kind of fit floral, geometric, or children's prints. And so I would hold them up and say, like, this one is mostly blue, but I see that kind of, they call it nectarine color in the middle there. So I thought, yeah, that would be pretty. So I just went through my stash and just looked to see, you know, do they complement the colors well? If the background color isn't a good match, but I saw like, oh, there's the red and yellow and the green in there, you know, then it would make the cut. So I have lots of fabrics that I pulled for this, and I do remember, you know, gingham was a popular one too. So I'll show you the ones that I decided to keep. Let me move these back a little bit. Get a sense of the fabrics that'll be in here. So these ones, like I said, they were all held up to the colors I have, and I thought they would look nice. And there were oranges in there, and then there's these more softer corals that I still think look nice in there. So there's quite an assortment. And again, some of them, like this one, I thought, oh, these don't look much like the other colors that I have, but then I would pull those solids. These ones matched the charm pack well. There were some in here that I thought looked good, and so then when I held this up to it, I thought, oh no, that looks nice too. So you'll be surprised what looks nice that maybe you wouldn't expect, if it seems very different from the others. And I had some of the bolder reds and blues that the earlier feed sack fabrics had. And then we get into the ones that specifically say 1930s on them. That one, the selvage is a little cut off, but this is part of the Flower House 1930s by Debbie Beeves. Again, those Robert Kaufman prints. So those ones I knew were a safe bet because they already are made to look like them. And then I found some, got a little more purple, and some character prints. Again, these would be the ones that are more geared toward children's apparel. Characters there. And if you saw my last video about my Sew Expo finds, you may have seen some of these prints I picked up there. These are from the 30s Playtime collection from Riley Blake Designs. There's Little Bo Peep. So I got more animal prints there, little bunnies. And again, if I hold these up to my solids, they look really nice together. And there's still some of that darker navy in there, the soft green. So these will look great too. These little kids playing, elephants. And then I grabbed a few more florals. I was trying to grab more purples, so this one is a bit darker, but then when I look at the purples that I picked up, I think it looks really nice with this one. So again, it's just going to be a matter of choosing the right solids to complement the fabrics, and I think as long as they go with the solids, it'll all fit nicely together in the quilt because those solids coordinate well together. So again, just real quick, there's a few of those to give you an idea of what else is in there. I had a few more, a lot of Lori Holt's prints, like from her cookbook line. Those seem to work well. Got some pinks, a little more of the gingham prints, just the pastels. So again, I just thought I'd keep these to try. Little birds there. And I have a few more brighter reds, some of those softer oranges, the corals. So these are all just fat quarters I've picked up or scraps I have left from other quilts. And then let me show you the ones that didn't make the cut that I had pulled. This one I thought was just too dark. It wasn't quite navy, which I would have kept navy, but it was just too dark of a blue. I wanted the pastel blue. This one I thought just seemed too gold. You know, I know I have some that have gold tones, but this one is softer. It looks more pastel to me, so that's why I'm still considering this one. This one I just feel like didn't really match the motif. The purple looks right and it's small, but just the I don't know, the little wreath shape I wasn't as sure about, so I took that one out. Now if I really need more purple, I might keep that one handy. And then these were reds that I thought were a little dark. I think these are maybe Tilda prints. But I thought they were a little too dark. I wanted the bright lipstick red. This one, again, not quite navy, but too dark blue. And then this one, I just thought the motif didn't quite fit. It looked a little too detailed, even though the color seems right. This one was too bold of a pink, not pastel enough. And then these ones had some of the bright colors, but I got them from a vintage fabric vendor at a quilt show I went to, and she was saying these were more 70s, which, you know, I still see the little prints in here, but I thought they're kind of bold and busy next to all the pastels, so I didn't quite like how those looked. I thought pops of red would be fine. And then these ones are a really dark orange. I thought the prints looked great, but the orange was just too dark. So when I held it up to the orange that I had, I just thought it was a little too dark. So again, I'm not putting them completely away because I might decide that they'll work, but I think I have a lot of good prints to work with. I also pulled this layer cake that I've had for several years. It's called Petite Treat by Penny Rose Fabrics from the Cottage Mama, and she does a lot of kind of vintage looking character prints. Now some of these I think are too big. They're very cute, but there are prints in here like the little bows. There's the florals, and there are those soft colors. There's the little kittens on the soft blue, so some of these I think could work too. So I'm not going to pull out all the individual fabrics here, but I just wanted you to see there are some in here that could work. So I think the color palette could be nice with what I have. So I'm going to leave those in as some options if I have smaller pieces I need. And then the final thing I have are my actual feed sack fabrics that I've picked up. Some were from antique stores, some were from vintage fabric vendors at craft shows I've gone to. And I was kind of picking up the reds and blues when I got them. Now these aren't entire feed sacks, they're just pieces of them. They feel like a looser weave. They're soft, but they definitely don't feel like the quilting cotton. So when I went to the fabric store and asked, I showed her these and asked, you know, what should I use if I want to incorporate them into a quilt with my regular quilting cotton. And she suggested this really lightweight interfacing. It has an adhesive on one side, so you just iron it on for a few seconds just to kind of stiffen it up a bit and give it a little more structure. So I'll be doing that, but I've had these for a while and I just think it's time to use them, and this would be a good project to do that in. Here are all my selected prints. One more time, I tried to get them all showing. I have the solids in the back. So I have my reds, and then we have those soft oranges, the yellows. This is my charm pack here. And we get into some of the light blues and light greens. Lots of different blues here. And then the purple end. I've got my kind of navy, the darker blues right in here. Feed sack prints. That layer cake that might have some good pastel options inside. And then all of my pinks. So lots of pretty fabrics to work with and make this sampler quilt. I'm really looking forward to this and just having fun finding good color combinations and making these blocks come to life.
I hope you enjoyed seeing a peek into the fabrics I've been collecting, and look forward to seeing them turned into some beautiful blocks. I've made a few already, which I'll share in my next video as I demonstrate how I foundation paper piece. I hope you'll stay tuned for that video, which will be next. And then, like I said, I have something special planned for the remaining blocks. I want to do 30 of them, and I've created a setting for them that I think is going to look great. So I hope you'll come along on this next quilting endeavor with me, and I will see you next time.